Okay, welcome back. Hold on, let me make this a little bigger again for your viewing pleasure. All right. So this is going to be the second video of the I Does This series where I'm going to attempt, well, I will basically do philosophy, um, keeping in mind that I'm trying to show you what I'm doing as I do philosophy. So, okay. Now, this this is not going to be the first exegesis. This is not going to be the first philosophical poem, but it's going to be what the series will basically, yeah, consists of the articles or the essays or maybe the chapters from certain books that I will pull from. Okay, so I've divided it into three parts basically. The first part, as promised in the video, is I'm going to pull from chapters of this book. This is a survey of metaphysics by E.J. Lowe. Um, yeah, so I've read the preface and I've read the first section on what is metaphysics, which actually took me a little longer to read and understand than I had anticipated, and I'm hoping the rest of the book won't be that difficult. Not that it was super difficult, but it was just, again, a little harder than I thought it was going to be. Um, okay, enough. I won't complain yet. Um, so that's the first one. So I'll pull from that. The second kinds of philosophy, or yes, philosophy that I'll do, or the second source of materials, are from three books that I have on philosophical puzzles. So I have this book here by Roy Sorensen. As you can see here, it's called A Brief History of the Paradox, Philosophy and the Labyrinths of the Mind by Roy Sorensen. So I might pull some philosophical puzzles from here to explain, and then if Sorensen offers a proposed solution to that, I'll do exegesis and explain his solution. And if I think it's worth critiquing, like then we'll critique it. But sometimes yeah, it'll just be one possible solution, not necessarily the right solution. Then I have another book on paradoxes here. This is Sainsbury, R.M. Sainsbury. There's a different Sainsbury who's an excellent philosopher. I think his name is Mark Sainsbury. This is not Mark Sainsbury. I don't think so. Right? R.M. I don't know what the R.M. stands for, but yeah, I don't think it's the same Sainsbury as I'm thinking of, but could be. Maybe I'm yeah confused. Anyway, so this is the book Sainsbury. This is paradoxes. So I might pull a paradox, and I'm sure that some of the paradoxes are going to overlap because it's still like Zeno's paradox and other paradoxes that are famous from the Greeks. And then I have this book here. This is Labyrinths of Reason, Paradox, Puzzles, and the Frailty of Knowledge by William Poundstone. Yeah, go pound some stone. So yeah, sometimes they're called paradoxes or puzzles, or I forget if the word is pronounced sorites or sorites. One of those. It's Sorites. I should have looked that up. I don't want to sound as ignorant as I really am. But anyway, so then the third one is what I have here. The third one I I I asked ChatGPT to give me roughly 12 classical essays from philosophy of language from in the analytic tradition, just analytics, not predating really Russell. I mean, not predating, yeah, Russell or Frege. So philosophy of language, metaphysics, and epistemology. Roughly 12 classical texts, or really 12 classical essays. Because when I say text, when I said text, when I say text, I mean anything. Like, but ChatGPT took me to mean books, so I had to rephrase it into essays, but it still gave me some chapters in books, which is fine because I thought they were important. Now, I took out some of the uh, recommendations from ChatGPT and I included some of my own just from my experience. That's what I thought like I remember would be really good for undergraduates and not overwhelming and also not too long because yeah, there's limitations to what I want to do as far as this series. Like I'm not going to do exegesis on a 25-page essay. That would be yeah, that would be ridiculous. I don't know if you can hear the buzzing in the background. That's the neighbor's gardener, but so I hope it's not too annoying. All right, so here we go. We'll talk. I'll give you the text, and the comments are by ChatGPT. The side notes. Um, within the philosophy of language, we can start off, and these are pretty much in order. That I will attempt them. That I will do them. Gottlob Frege on sense and reference, otherwise known as on Sinn and Bedeutung. Um, and this is where he distinguishes between sense, the mode of presentation, how you perceive an object, and yeah, and then and reference what that object actually is. And the famous example, or one famous example, is the like there's a thing in the sky that's called the evening star. And let's say Johnny, who stays up late, always sees the evening star as the last thing he sees before he goes to bed. But he wakes up really late too because he goes to bed late, and he never sees the morning star. But Julie, who's a early sleeper, early riser, never sees the evening star, but always sees the morning star. But what they don't know is that it's the same star. The morning star and the evening star is the same star. So Johnny knows, let's call it Venus. Johnny knows Venus, the star. They call the star Venus. Johnny knows Venus as the star that is the last to shine and the brightest and at night, or it's the brightest star that he sees at night before he goes to bed. So that's what he knows it at. If you woke him up early and then he saw the morning star, he wouldn't recognize it as the same star. Like he doesn't know Venus as the bright star in the morning either. So, but Julie only knows it that way. So if you woke her up from her early sleep and said, "Look, Julie, look at this beautiful star at night," and she was like, "Oh, wow, it's amazing," but she wouldn't recognize it as Venus either because she only knows Venus as the bright star in the morning. She doesn't. So the way that the mode of presentation, the bright star at night, the mode of presentation, the bright star in the morning, is different for each of them, but it's the same star. So it's the same denotation, the same reference, or the same referent, the noun, right? So that's the idea, and he uses this distinction to answer some puzzles. Uh, Okay, whether he's right or wrong, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying this is what the idea is. Okay, I'm not going to go deeply into all of these. Let me just go down the list. In the ChatGPT comments, I can read without trying to explain it all. Because if I do this extemporaneously, sometimes I'm just going to misremember things, or I'm not going to state things fully or as clearly as I would if I sat down and wrote. All right, Frege again, the thought. This is going to help understand. This is going to help clarify on Bedeutung. Also, some of Frege's essays to to Jordan or to Russell would help, but yeah, we can't. I can't. It can't be all Frege stuff here, or else. Anyway, so it could be, but I'm not gonna have it like that. Anyways, argues that propositions, which are thoughts, or which is a slightly different meaning than what propositions mean to contemporary philosophers, are objective, not subjective. They're objective, so they don't change, and they're shareable entities. And so then I can understand them and you can understand them and we both can understand the same thing, because I can see it, you can see it. They're shareable. Or I can give it to you and you can, oh, yeah, that sounds weird. And then they're distinct from psychological acts. Okay, and so these are the things that form the content of judgments, basically, and so yeah, the thought will inform on seine Bedeutung, and it will inform his Begriffsschrift, which I didn't put on here, but okay. Bertrand Russell on denoting, where he has this famous logical apparatus to solve problems that expressions like the present King of France pose in certain constructions, in certain grammatical constructions. Um, and here he says, here's where the beginning of his logical tools to eliminate ambiguous reference, or maybe vacuous reference, where it doesn't really refer to anything real. And so the present King of France, there is no present King of France, but we understand the present King of France works similarly to names to pick out somebody. Like the present King of Saudi Arabia picks out somebody. but the present king of France doesn't pick out somebody, but they're both the same kind of expression, the present king and then it just of some country's name. So he has a way of eliminating the problem by, yeah, saying it's actually like the it's actually a certain logical expression. Um, we should think of it as a certain a different way of expressing than we normally. I don't want to go into it, and right now I can't seem to process what I want to say anyway. Okay, Peter Strawson on referring critiques Russell, emphasizes contextual use of language. So we'll go into on referring. I don't want to read all these; it's going to take forever. Like you can read them if you want. You can pause and read them if you want. But I'm just giving you the articles. Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigation, sections 1 through 43. This is Wittgenstein basically saying that meaning is use. And that has a certain meaning, obviously. And so basically, it's how we use words. If you know how to use the words, then you know what they mean. Like, take the word Gesundheit. When people sneeze, you can say Gesundheit. But I doubt m many of you know what Gesundheit means in German. And even if you don't, it doesn't matter because you know that when people sneeze, and in English, we in America here, we say Gesundheit to them, kind of like we say bless you to them. And that's it. That's all you have to know. You don't have to know like Gesundheit to be like a fully informed English speaker. You're not like at fault as an competent English speaker because you don't know the meaning of Gesundheit in German because it doesn't matter in English when you use it, or at least in America when you use it. So anyway, so that's kind of the idea that some words, their meaning is just going to be their use. And if you're a competent English speaker, you will know how to use these words and that's it. You know the meanings. Okay, and I don't think it applies to all words, but like anyway, section 1 through 43, and Wittgenstein sections and the philosophical investigations. Each section could be like maybe a quarter of a page. Sometimes they're a little longer, like maybe a half of a page, but I don't remember anything really being that much longer than a half of a page, a section. So this is not going to be 43 pages even. It's going to be like, I would say something like 20 pages of reading for the first sections. I could look it up. I have the book over here, but I'm not going to. Okay, Rudolf Carnap, a big name in analytic philosophy, the elimination of metaphysics through logical analysis of language, similar to what Russell's doing. Similar to what Russell's doing. Uh, Quine, Two Dogmas of Empiricism, classic, very, very, very well known text. Very, very like this is, yeah. You'll come across this if you took philosophy classes. Eventually, you would come across this. Critiques of the analytic synthetic distinction and of reductionism, arguing that knowledge is a holistic web tested by experience. This is kind of like a kind of like a, it's not coherentism, but it's kind of the idea that everything fits together and that if if it fits within this system of knowledge, uh, then yeah, that's kind of knowledge. Knowledge is a system, and that everything else supports or validates or invalidates other claims within that system. I really should stop speaking into extemporaneously about articles I haven't read in 15, 20 years. H.P. Price. H.P. Grice, his article Meaning, introduces the idea of speaker meaning versus sentence meaning. Kripke will talk about speaker meaning and semantic meaning. Um, yeah, I happen to think there are more. I happen to think that sentences don't have a preferential or a primary meaning. I think that whatever the speaker intends to mean, that's one meaning of the sentence. Whatever you, as the listener, let's say you're Johnny, whatever you, Johnny, understand, because of whatever knowledge you have, whatever information you have, that's another meaning right along with the speaker meaning. And then if Susie's there and she has a different set of uh, if she understands other things that maybe you don't understand that are relevant, like that might cause her to interpret the sentence a different way, her meaning is also perfectly legit, and yours is also perfectly legit, even though maybe you know less than Susie, and maybe even though you know less pertinent things than she does regarding what the speaker could be saying. Uh, all valid, all equally have claim to the meaning of that sentence. So I think sentences don't have a unique, particular, or primary meaning. Uh, it just depends on the speaker and the listener. But that's just my personal view. I'm not arguing for it, so I'm just stating it. I will defend this view somewhere, but maybe not in this series. Donald Davidson, Truth and Meaning, proposes truth conditional semantics, which I like. Truth conditional, like what would have to be true for that sentence? What would have to be true? What would have to be the case? How would the world have to be, in other words, for that sentence to be true? And so those are the truth conditions. And if things are the way the sentence says, then yeah, then the sentence is true or not. And then you would know the meaning because the things that you envision would have to be true. Those would be the meaning. Oh, it means this. This would have to be the case, and this would have to be the case, and so that's roughly it. Sorry. Again, me speaking. I don't know. I can't talk philosophy for crap. When I write philosophy, you'll see it's a whole different thing. But yeah, Saul Kripke, Naming and Necessity. This is actually a book, a textbook, not textbook, a book. It's not too big. Um, Probably the most famous book, like since 1970. It's the most famous book written in philosophy. Saul Kripke is like probably the biggest name in philosophy since the 19 like I don't know 60s, whenever he was like prominent. Anyway, lectures 1 and 2 only. I don't know how many pages that would be, but it develops this idea of rigid designation. Rigid designation means it doesn't change, it doesn't alter. So let's say my name is Carlos, and Carlos would pick me out in the way Saul Kripke talks in any possible world in which I exist. It would pick me out. Like so, Carlos. Like I wouldn't that name wouldn't alter designation, which is kind of like the reference. Again, okay, so yeah, so this is a really yeah, you have to know naming necessity, I think. Hillary Putnam is one of my favorite philosophers. Um, he's recognized, and it's not like people don't recognize how good he was, but I especially like him. I think like yeah, he's better than most people think. But anyway, the meaning of meaning, which doesn't mean I agree with everything he says, but anyway, argues for semantic externalism, meaning that the meaning of the words aren't solely determined in your head. They're not just definitions that you have in your head, and that's the meaning of the word. They're partly determined or wholly determined sometimes, maybe, but mostly partly determined by what exists in the world. Right? So that's the idea. And then he has the famous twin Earth example to like illustrate this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this again. Some of these essays, not some of these, most of these essays I read more than 15 years ago. So yeah, I'm fuzzy on exactly what I got out of them the first time. David Kaplan. David Kaplan taught at UCLA while I was there. I took 2 classes uh, by Kaplan. I finished only one of them because one of them I had to drop the midterm just because. Yeah, I couldn't finish the midterm. I had a change of mind about what exactly I was going to say in the midterm, and I didn't have enough time to like fully think out my revised ideas. So yeah, I asked him if I can have a late withdrawal, and he granted it. He granted it only after questioning me about my new interpretation. Because, like, yeah, I don't know if he would have granted it to me if I didn't explain my new interpretation. Uh, because sometimes people just like get stuck and they want to withdraw, but there is a due date of withdrawing, and you can get a late one, but like yeah, some most professors just grant it to you, but yeah, he asked me mine, and then I gave him my new interpretation, and he was satisfied that it was a legitimate interpretation in the sense that it's not something like that I had an interpretation. It was different from the one that he proposed in class. Actually, he had proposed a certain interpretation of he had proposed a certain interpretation of on denoting, and basically students were supposed to not supposed to, but students were writing in their own words what they understood the lecture to be, and so they were basically uh, explaining and expounding on his his concept his interpretation of denoting that he presented in class, which wasn't necessarily the one he believed in, but it was the most popular one. Anyway, and so yeah. Uh, so that, but no, I take that back. That was on That was on his Frege class on the Begriffsschrift and on Sinn und Bedeutung and on thought. That's the one I had a change of heart or a change of mind in. The one on denoting, I actually, yeah, I got if I can say, I got an A plus in his class. It's the only A plus I ever received at UCLA, and it came from the most eminent philosopher at their program. That said, he is somewhat of a lax grader, so I didn't, as proud as I am of that A plus, and as much as I brag about it, well, I don't brag about it often, but I am here. It's with the caveat that Kaplan is somewhat of a lax grader, and I don't think I would have gotten an A plus from his TAs who are not known to be lax graders. Anyway, that's it. Philosophy and language. This is where I've done my most reading. I've read on sense and reference. I've read the thought. I've read on denoting. I've read on referring. I've read the first three, I mean, the first 43 sections of philosophical explanations. I haven't read the elimination of metaphysics through logical analysis. I have read Two Dogmas of Empiricism. I have read meaning. I don't remember if I've read truth and meaning, honestly. So let's just say I haven't. And I have read Naming and Necessity, and I have read Meaning, The Meaning of Meaning. And I've read demonstratives. I don't know if I've read the whole thing. I think there was parts of it, and I also read his The That, which is another article, famous article, but it's more on the logic side. Demonstratives at least touches a little bit more on the philosophy of language side, although they're both kind of like mixed together. Yeah, so these are, and all of these, like I haven't read any of these within the last, with the possible exception of, well, where is it? Oh, it's not even here. Yeah, with maybe the possible exception of the first three on denoting. I looked at these, but maybe like 5 years ago. The other, and otherwise, like we're talking like 20 years ago when I read these. Okay, so yeah, you can just guess how much I've forgotten. Next, metaphysics. These are the roughly 12 essays that we'll go into. Gottlob Frege on concept and object, where he differentiates concepts from objects. So it says here, foundational for logic and ontology. Russell's The Philosophy of Logical Atomism. I have a book on Russell's atomism. I also have a book on Wittgenstein's atomism, but I don't think I have Russell's book, The Philosophy of Logical Atomism, the book itself. So I might have to pick that up still. Okay. Rudolf Carnap, Empiricism, Semantics, and Ontology is just an essay. I have not read this. Quine's On What There Is. I read this long, long ago. This is a very important text. I think this is the text where he gives us his like method of determining what you would consider as part of your ontology. And this is a famous one. I see philosophers cite Quine all the time about his method. So it's been a long time, so I don't really remember it, but we'll take a look at it. David Strawson, Descriptive Metaphysics. I don't remember reading this. Another David Strawson, his individuals, this book, introductory. So this is going to be the intro and maybe introductory chapters. I'll see which ones exactly are pertinent. Analyzes particulars, which is one of my favorite topics in metaphysics, universals and particulars. And he talks about identity, another interest of mine. I'm not too well versed on it, but yeah, I'm really interested in identity, focusing on how objects are conceptualized as individuals. Okay, so this is going to be important for ontology. Kripke, Naming and Necessity. This is the third lecture now. We did the first two for the for philosophy of language stuff, where he talks about necessary truths. Truth, by the way, is a metaphysical notion because truth, for the most part, for most people, is intended to pick out, is intended to describe the world, how the world is. So if the world is as you say, then your sentence is true. So it's a metaphysical notion. Knowledge is an epistemic notion. But often talks about truth get grouped into philosophy of language stuff. Okay. And rigid designation, we talked about rigid designation. Well, I talked about it, but not too clearly. And then connecting names to metaphysical necessity. Okay, we won't go into what that's supposed to mean exactly. David Lewis. David Lewis is a tough read for me. Like, yeah, especially because he does a bunch of symbolic logic and possible worlds talk, and I hate possible worlds talk. And I'm okay at symbolic logic, but I'm not a logic geek where these guys know like all kinds of modal logics and Yeah, yeah. Okay. Counterpart theory and qualified modal logic. Now, I've heard that this paper is a good entryway into like um, possible worlds talk. So if you're gonna understand possible worlds talk, this might be a good paper to understand first. Saul Kripke, Identity and Necessity. This is an essay. It's not a book. The book is Naming and Necessity. This shows that identity statements can be necessary, which challenges descriptivist accounts of names. In other words, where the names are just descriptions. Like if you know, like if I say Aristotle was a great philosopher, and you're like, well, do you know who Aristotle was? And I'm like, and you're like, yeah, I know. I'm like, who was he? Did you ever meet him? Did you ever see him? Like, no. Then who was he? Oh, Aristotle, he was the student of Plato. Okay, that's a description. So you know Aristotle, the name, the person, let's say, or the name as a description. It's so the name is kind of like a foil for a description, right? And that's one theory about what names are. They're like foils for descriptions. But Kripke's challenging that. Okay. Hillary Putnam, there's Hillary Putnam again, the meaning of meaning. Also relevant here, externalism affects what exists. As we said, that what exists in the world is going to determine what we mean by the things that we say in referring to those things. That's kind of weird way of phrasing things, but anyway. Peter von Inwagen, one of my favorites, The Doctrine of Arbitrary Undetached Parts. I don't know why I haven't read this. Like I would think I have read a bunch. I've read a bunch of Inwagen, but I read it from his books, and maybe just I guess this article didn't come up. Discusses mereology. Mereology is the study, the philosophical study, not just any kind of study, the philosophical study of parts and wholes and their relations. Okay, it gets interesting. You'd be surprised. It sounds completely boring and dry, but it's kind of fun. Theodore Sider, Four Dimensionalism. This essay uh, develops per-durantism. So per-durantism is just about like identity over time. Like if if this thing at time x is the same thing at x plus one, at x plus two, at x plus a million, and then and how can we say that it's the same thing, right? So this is the idea, and he offers a position that objects are space worms. So it's just like they're continuous. They but through time. So if you think here's this object, and here's that object at x plus one, and then here's the object at x plus three, and so you see we just keep attaching, it like builds like a worm and time worm. That's what he thinks. That's what he's proposing, made of temporal parts, not physical parts, but temporal parts. Anyway, clarifying. I mean, they are still physical. Anyway, clarifying persistence and identity over time. Yes. Okay. That's no, sorry, that's metaphysics. Metaphysics. Now we go to epistemology. Um, Now, this is why I said that there's not 12. Well, this is why I alluded to the fact that there's not 12 essays here, but it's still going to be 12 because this is the first one is 1 through 5 chapters. And chapters are longer usually than essays, but not terribly long here. Bertrand Russell's The Problem of Philosophy. It's a mid-sized book. I don't know how many pages, maybe like 200, maybe 220. I can't see it being much more. I have it here, but I'm not going to check. Chapters 1 through 3, we kind of group together because we're talking about appearance and reality. Appearance and reality. So he distinguishes um, how things seem, how things appear, and how things are, which is reality. Okay, and this is his notion of sense data. Sense data is the information that we get from reality, but the information we get is how things seem. Um, Chapter 2, the existence of matter. He's still a realist. He's not an idealist. He doesn't think that the world consists only of ideas, whether it's the ideas in our minds or the ideas in the mind of God. He's a realist. He thinks things exist externally, independently of our minds or anyone's minds. So if all minds disappeared from the rest of the universe would still be there. Like there would still be a rest of the universe to still be there. Okay, chapter 3, the nature of matter, explains what physical objects are via sense data. So this is a kind of an abduction argument, setting up his epistemological perception. So an abduction is basically reasoning backwards from given information. It's kind of like think about like if you're a detective and you walk into a crime scene, right? And then like think of Sherlock Holmes or think of like I don't know I was going to say Columbo, but that's way too old. I'd be dating myself. Anyway, so think of a detective walking into a crime scene and he sees blood stains here, scratch marks there. The vase has been broken and it's fallen off in a certain direction. So from this, he kind of like thinks backwards into what must have occurred in that room for things to have resulted in the way they have, for things to be the way they are now. That's abduction. You're reasoning back to the best thing to think, how things would have had to be or could have most likely have been for things to be the way they are now. That's kind of the idea. And so this is the idea with sense data. We only have sense data. That's all we have access to. We don't have, according to Russell, not according to all philosophers, we don't have direct access to the world. You don't really see the dog directly. I mean, you see the dog, but what's processed, but the way you are able to like see the dog is through the sense data. And so from the sense data, we can extrapolate to what must the real world be like for given that we have this kind of sense data. That's the idea. I hope that made sense. I think like that kind of made sense. I really need to improve on my speaking. Chapter 4 and 5, idealism. Again, that the world is our ideas. The world, the nature of the world is ideas, right? Not physical things that are ideas. But Russell critiques this idea. Russell and Wittgenstein and Frege all strongly oppose this view, especially Russell and Wittgenstein, and this is what actually leads them to adopt their logical atomism view, and then we'll see that later. So this is critiques of subjective idealism, shows why realism provides a better explanation of knowledge. Number 5, knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. This is Russell's famous dichotomy. Knowledge by acquaintance. I'm walking down the road, you're walking down the road, I bump into you, you're like, you look over and you're like, and you see me, like, you're like, hey, what's going on, buddy? Watch where you're going. That's direct, immediate experience. I'm right in front of you. Okay. Seeing color. Maybe that's not a good example. Maybe seeing color is the example, different example than seeing me. Okay, but I think not. And then knowledge by description is just like the Aristotle case. You just know Aristotle through descriptions of Aristotle. Okay, next. You've never bumped into Aristotle in the street. A.J. Ayer, The Problem of Philosophy. I don't remember reading this, but Ayer is a big name. Presents a logical positivist approach. So Ayer, I guess, okay, so Ayer is a logical positivist. The logical positivists, their mantra was basically verification. Like, no claim about the world is true or even makes sense, doesn't even make sense. It's kind of like just gibberish, folderol, if it cannot be verified empirically. So if you say to me like, "Oh, Carlos, yesterday I swear I saw a ghost," I'm like, that statement cannot be verified. How can we verify that you saw a ghost or that there are ghosts? There's no way to prove. There's no way to show that this is true or false. So then your sentence is nonsense. You might as well have said, Carlos, yesterday I saw a leprechaun. Uh, yeah. So like, there's no way of verifying leprechauns are real, and there's no way of verifying this. So like, it's nonsense. So that's verificationism. Um, and basically they really right. They were really opposed to certain metaphysical claims that they thought like to them were like they're puzzles and they're headaches, but they're like, we'll just do away with it. We can do away with it because like there's no way to verify this kind of statements. Is God is real? God is not real? Like so. Anyway, uh, Ayer and Carnap was also, I think, a logical positivist. Edmund Gettier, one of my favorites, and this is one of my favorite essays of all time. And I strongly disagree with it, but it doesn't take away from the beautiful writing and the ingenious yeah, like the ingenious analogies or scenarios that he comes up with to like explicate his points. challenges the classical JTB account of knowledge. JTB is justified true belief. So the sentence, the essay is justified true belief? Is this conception of knowledge the right conception? Gettier says no. Most philosophers today say no. I don't say yes, but I don't say no. I think that Gettier in this essay doesn't touch really justify true belief. I think something has gone seriously wrong in the way he's conceiving the problem. And this is my unique uh, take. It's not necessarily a mainstream take in philosophy. Although a lot of people object to what Gettier did, but I don't remember reading anyone with my particular objection, which kind of scares me because I could be just completely wrong, or I could be super proud that I figured out the right way of criticizing Gettier, but who knows about that? Yeah, I'd have to argue that. Obviously, I have somewhere else, but not here. It won't be in this. Well, it might be in this when I do my criticisms. Anyway, but JTB, justify true belief. Is it knowledge? Uh, we'll find out, I guess. David Chisholm, The Problem of the Criterion. I have not read this. Examines skepticism and epistemic circularity, asking how we justify knowledge claims. Quine, Epistemology Naturalized. I have not read this. Proposes naturalizing epistemology, treating knowledge as part of the empirical psychology. I don't like this idea, but maybe. I don't know. I have to read it. Hilary Putnam, Brains in a Vat. I've read this a long time ago. Uses semantic externalism to refute radical skepticism by showing the limitations of certain skeptical hypotheses. Alvin Goldman, I have his book on epistemology. I'm hoping that essay is in there, but I don't know. But either way, I'll get access to these essays. Develops reliabilism, defining justification in terms of reliable cognitive processes. Keith Laird, this is the last one because the Russell book is 5 chapters, so that's 1 through 5, and so this will take us to 12 essays, really, or if we count chapters as essays. Keith Laird, Knowledge, Truth, and Evidence connects justification to evidence, exploring coherent and foundationalist accounts. Yeah, that's it. So this is where I will be drawing my readings from. I keep saying on in another video. And those are the three main sources. The three main sources, like I said, is E.J. Lowe's A Survey of Metaphysics. I also have Alyssa Ney's Metaphysics book from the Routledge series, and she has taken over from Michael Lowe. So he basically wrote the same kind of book for Routledge, An Introduction to Metaphysics. I have his book too. I have Audi's book from the Routledge series, and I own William Lycan's Philosophy of Language book, but I can't find it anywhere, which is annoying. And it's not like I let somebody borrow it because nobody I know does philosophy. Well, I know people that do philosophy, but they don't borrow my books. Anyway, so yeah, that's it. I had some other comments, but I think I'll spare you my gibberish. These are the books. These are the essays. If you think there's another classical essay that would be good to study, to do exegesis on, and then probably to criticize or to point out the weaknesses, because every essay has a weakness. Every essay, my own included. You can leave it in the comments. Given that it's not overly sophisticated, like if you just pick like a random David Lewis article, like maybe I can't understand it, and then good luck me teaching it. Like, so kind of classic and not too long. Like I'm not doing exegesis, like I said, on a 30-page essay. That would be hours if I was going to do a decent job. Okay, but like I can see wanting another article by Frege or like I don't know Thomas Nagel, Barry Stroud. But again, these are classical texts. These are like they have a great impact in analytic philosophy, in the history of analytic philosophy. Which isn't to say that there haven't been excellent essays written, uh, but they wouldn't be counted as classical in that sense. Okay, that's it. I'm rambling as I always do. Later. And yeah, whatever comments you leave, I will try to like get back to you, or I'll give you a little heart. So cute, so cute. All right, later. I gotta go. Peace.